Good morning. Welcome to the WIOA webinar. My name is Scott Shook with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. I will be your facilitator for today's webinar. As a reminder, all participants on the call are in mute mode. Please use the question and answer box if you have any questions or comments, as we'll be using that process to be able to facilitate your questions. This webinar is going to be recorded and will be available on the Illinois WorkNet website, usually by the end of today. You will receive a survey asking you about today's webinar. Please share with us your experience and any suggestions that you might have to help us improve these webinars. It would also be an avenue in which you could ask any questions that we can forward to our panelist experts. With that, I'll turn the information over to Diana Robinson.
Thank you very much, Scott, and good morning, everyone. Hope you all had a good 3-day weekend and you're ready for the home stretch on the service integration self-assessment process. So I've been working with the WIOA state agency partners to make sure that the process is responsive to your needs and making sure that you have the resources that you need to complete this process in good order. We've been very busy of late, primarily in responding to your questions, correcting any bugs in the forms that we've developed to try to make it as easy as possible for you to move through the self-assessment process. We think that all of the bugs in these documents, the appendices, have been fixed, but as we go through the process, those of you who are in the vanguard are helping to point out the few glitches that we do need to attend to, and we think that we've done all that. The latest versions of all the forms are now on Illinois WorkNet, and we have a new and short URL that will help you access that website much more easily, and it's easy to remember. It's Illinois WorkNet, all one word, .com/SI. And you click on that, and you should have all the information that you need at your fingertips. And I have to apologize in advance. My technology is not cooperating this morning. I have a telephone connection, but I can't see the screen. So, Scott, do you have the homepage for the service integration content up?
Yes, it is. It's under illinoisworknet.com/SI.
Perfect. So when you all log on, you'll see that there are 4 main links that you can click on that will take you to all the information that we currently have for you. The link on the far left under Guidance and Forms is probably the one that you'll be using the most often, as it has all of the key documents, including all of the fillable appendices, as well as the facilitator guide and the other content that will help you move through the self-assessment process. The next link, Training Technical Assistance and Other Resources, contains the, just opening this on my screen, contains the webinars that have been recorded and all of the related information that will help you outside of the policy guidance and forms. The next button over is Forum and the FAQs, and we've just updated that. We took a lot of content from the last webinar just a week ago. We responded to your questions and redid the FAQ, so it should be a pretty helpful source of additional information. So if you do have a question, we recommend that you check out the FAQ, see if it might have been answered already, and if not, please forward your questions to me or to one of the contacts that are listed on the homepage of the service integration site. And then finally, we have a page dedicated to practices. We haven't populated it with too much information yet, and we'll be turning to you to help us do that. If you have any service integration related practice that you think is innovative or effective, please let one of us know, and we'll get in touch with you and get a little more information. Ideally, these are not these are not long descriptions, but they provide a thumbnail capsule about what the practice is, who one could contact to get more information about it, and then some kind of attachment that would give the individual a little more substance on what that practice is. So among these 4 links, we're hoping that you'll find what you need to keep moving along the self-assessment timeline. We are also looking forward to the face-to-face meeting that we'll be holding in Bloomington next week on the 10th. We are going to have our WinTech colleagues back with us. They're going to be facilitating the session, and the intent is to help teams of local workforce planning folks move further along the self-assessment timeline. So whether you've just completed your self-assessment or you've already identified your priority areas and are moving into action planning, they will work with you based on where you are and make sure that you've got all your questions answered and are making enough progress that you'll be able to meet the September 30th deadline. So that is coming up. I probably don't have to remind you that it's a little over 3 weeks, but based on the feedback we've been getting from you and the folks that have checked in with us, it seems as though many of you are making good progress and shouldn't have any trouble meeting that deadline. Just as a point of information, we are requiring that your final self-assessment report be presented to either your local workforce board at one of its regular meetings or potentially some subcommittee or subgroup of the full board. It's really important that they understand the action items that you're proposing because those priorities will be feeding into the local and regional WIOA planning process. And obviously the board members need to be fully aware of what you propose to move forward on that front. With that, we wanted to have this webinar just to make sure that your questions are answered. If you have any additional requests for TA, we can field those this morning as well. But this really is your opportunity. We're calling it an open mic to raise whatever issues you have and see if we can get them answered for you this morning. So as Scott said, we're going to be using the question box for you to put in your issues or questions or suggestions, and we'll have Scott moderate those, and we can start now. Hopefully there's some questions that you have already. So Scott, anything in there?
I don't have any questions. I have an individual holding their hand up.
Let's see. If we can't get to unmuting them, maybe they can use the question box to ask something? Or
yes.
Comment?
That would work well. So do not have any questions. Would you like me to show the documents? Go ahead.
Folks should be pretty much up to speed. Let's see. Why don't we quickly go through the guidance and forms page? If we click on that, again, I'm at a bit of disadvantage because I can't see your screen, but if I recall, I know we have all the appendices listed on the far right side, and I'm working off memory here, including
so I do have a question.
Oh, sure.
If you're ready. If we've completed the original Appendix H, do we need to redo with the revised form? From Deborah.
Yes. Appendix H is the only one that we will require you to complete, and that's because the original Appendix H only had the 7 functional areas in there as kind of the target of your conversation, when what we need is all 15 of the service integration goals. And we have redesigned that form, so it's now in an Excel spreadsheet. And we apologize in advance for the additional work. Hopefully it's just a fairly straightforward copying over of the information into the new Appendix H. But we felt that was very important, primarily because those 15, the ratings in each of the 15 goals are what will help each of the local workforce areas identify those top 3 to 5 priorities. If you've only done the 7 functions, that will not get you where you need to go to finish this process. So by entering the data in the revised Appendix H, it will automatically calculate for you what the scores are for each of the goals and the priority ratings. So that does a lot of the heavy lifting for you and will give you the results that should inform the discussion with your participants on what those top five or 3 service integration priorities are. So I know that a few of you were not thrilled about the process of having to redo that, and we sincerely apologize for that. As I indicated earlier, we're learning with you as we go through this process. We're developing the forms as quickly as we can, and inevitably a few of them had bugs that we didn't discover until a few of you pointed them out. So we made them as quickly as we could and ask that you do complete Appendix H. The other appendices, I know one of them that we had to change was J, and that is the action planning steps. What we did for that one was to simply give one sheet for each step so that it gave you an opportunity to provide the detail about how you're going to be addressing each of those priority goals. The other one that we revised was K, that's the last one, and that was simply to update you on what did need to be included in your final submission. I guess the good news on Appendix H is if you complete that, you do not need to submit I. And we didn't take that out of the website only because we didn't want to mess up the sequence, and we'll certainly change that for the next cycle, but we didn't want to make too many changes on this one. So a long-winded answer, and with apologies for you having to redo it, but hopefully it won't take very long and it'll give you very helpful results and keep you moving forward.
I do have another question. I realize, this is for Melanie. I realize we should be checking with our staff to discuss the self-assessment and solicit feedback. Are we also supposed to be meeting with the partners to go over the self-reported self-assessment also? I'm really not clear.
Yes, and I think I will give you a short response and then ask Lou Adams, who's with WinTAC, to talk a little bit about the process that they've developed, which we've adapted to Illinois. As a matter of fact, I'll just turn it over to Lou to shake it up a little bit.
Okay, thanks, Diana. Yeah, this is Lou Adams from WinTAC. Yes, that's the answer. We like to have every one of the partner agencies, the individual agencies, the individual titles, kind of do their own self-assessment of where they think the system is, where they think they, with all of their other partners, are. But then, really, the major intent of it is to come together with those core partners, or required in other partners if you want to do that, but with the core partners for sure, and come to a consensus on how you see not where your individual agency fits or their individual agency or title fits, but where are you at all together when it comes to these goals? Where do you think you're at, and then where would you like to be? And that's how the process was designed. We know from experience in all kinds of things, not just in workforce, but all kinds of things, is that if people build together their plans and have a shared vision of where they'd like to go as a system, as a workforce center, they're more likely to get there. And as my colleague Doug Keast, who I think is also on the line, often says, is that each partner, each staff member has their own unique sets of skills and competencies and resources that they bring to the table. So when those are aggregated together and working towards the same purpose, you get much more leverage with the individual job seeker or business than you would if you were working in your silos. So that's the idea, is to get out of the silos, to talk with one another, to come together as a group in terms of where you're at on the 15 or so, where you'd like to go, and then the prioritizing, and from that, actually, building your action plan. So that's the process, and the resources and the appendix and all those kinds of things in the guide lead you towards that. And Diane, I don't know if you want to add to that, or if Doug has anything to add. If I think he's on as a panelist.
Doug, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Lou, you answered that pretty well. The other thing, yeah, I lied. I do have something to add. You know, that with H, that's a really good question, because if you put all that information in, it will calculate the responses and give you a numeric number for where together that pulls together your scores. But as Lou was saying, the discussion that you have with your partners, the consensus score is probably more valuable to you in that discussion, rather than looking at a numeric score that you'll get if you average what everybody sets it at. So we really do encourage you to have those conversations with your core and required partners, because it'll strengthen your process in developing your work plan.
That's great. Thank you so much for the kind of the thought behind the process, which is also why we're putting so much emphasis on that Appendix H. What that represents is your discussions with all of your partners and bringing them together to arrive at some consensus around kind of where you are on both the current and desired levels for each goal, and then what the priority is for all of you in terms of moving forward on those. So that's at the heart of this whole self-assessment process. And the other point to emphasize is the one that Doug just made, which is this new Appendix H calculates the scores, but that really is just the springboard into the much deeper conversation about where are your true priorities? Which of those 15 goals is most important for you to work on in the coming year? So if you have any questions about how H works, you can contact either Laura Dom, who was the brains behind this form, and we thank Laura for her good work on that, or myself. So any other questions?
I do have another question. I do, and it comes from Betty. Since we have to redo these forms, are we going to be allowed extra time to submit them to the state?
The only form that you'll have to redo is H, and once you get into it, it really shouldn't take more than 15 minutes to half an hour at most. You're just taking the information you should have already collected and putting it into a different format. And the other forms, if they are working for you, then you can certainly submit them with your final package. You won't have to redo those. These forms were made to help you move along the process. And if you have a better way to do it, then this first year out, as we're testing the process, would be a good time to submit what you have come up with. It may be an improvement over our current process. So, sorry, I didn't actually answer the question, which was, will you be allowed additional time? We don't think that time will be all that significant, so we need to hold you to the September 30th deadline. Any other questions or comments?
Not at this time.
Okay. Trying to think. The other item that I did want to point out is the FAQ. And Scott, can you click on that link on the homepage? And let me know when you're on it. So as Scott's pulling that up.
All right, I'm on it.
Great. So the FAQ is in there in two formats. We do have a Word document that just compiles all of them in an easy-to-read format, which you can download and print off. We also have all of the text, and I think there are almost 20 questions now, that are on, the text is on the actual landing page itself. So if you prefer to scroll down on that, you can do that as well. Trying to think of some of the new information on there. I guess two things to point out. One is that it's much more intuitive to get to this landing page for service integration. If you just remember serviceintegration.com, I'm sorry, Illinois worknet.com/SI, you can get to it very quickly. We also have other links that you can get there from other pages in Illinois WorkNet. And then we've got all the webinars recorded and available to you under the training TA and other resources. So I think all the information that you need for your questions should be on the site, but if you can't find it or would just rather talk to a real person, we've got contacts from each of the state agency partners on that homepage, and myself as well would be happy to help you. So any other questions?
Not right now.
All right. Then just one more question back to those of you on the phone, and that's we are having this technical assistance session next Tuesday, and that's going to be all day in Bloomington at the Radisson Hotel and Conference Center. We are thrilled that Lou and Doug will be back. As you've already experienced, they've got just a great depth in working through this process. There's probably not a challenge they haven't encountered several times over. So just tapping into their experience and expertise, I think, will be a wonderful opportunity for every local workforce area. But I also wanted to find out from you on this call if there are particular topics that you'd like us to make sure we cover. Now would be a great time to suggest them. We've got the agenda in draft form. It's going to go out later today, but if there's a particular item you'd like to make sure that we spend some time on, why don't you put it in your chat box and Scott can share it with the others.
Diana, would it be helpful if I went over the agenda a little bit so people had an idea of what was on there and maybe could tell us what's missing or what they might want to see?
That's a great idea, Lou. Please do that.
Okay, so kind of the objectives of it is that when you're there, you'll come away with an understanding of the various resources and supports available to you, both from WorkNet, from the state of Illinois, but also from WinTAC, resources that we have. We build up is on our website at wintac.org, examples perhaps from other states and what they're doing or other local areas that we've worked with around the country that we can share for action planning and specific kinds of things that may be in your action plan. We're talking about how it's important to measure and covering, the usual kind of SMART process of for goal setting. And so we'll start with kind of a debrief, I think, and see how it's going, what you have to say, talk, and then go into the action plan, or probably go into the priority factors if I have the order right, and talk about how to come to priority if you haven't already done that, or if you have done that, to get a sense of how you came to it. Was it based on primarily on consensus? Did you factor in customer need? Did you pick stuff that's kind of low hanging, or a few things you think you can accomplish quickly? What's your capacity for it? How ready are you to take on the action plan? Some of those kinds of things. And we'll go into some action plans and share some examples of what others have done in that area, and give some tips and techniques on that. And also, one of the things we'll do is talk about guiding principles, because when you're doing this kind of stuff, and it's not like strategic planning in your own organization where it's your own leadership that's, where you're involved in doing that. When you're talking about multiple partners, then it's good to have some principles and some agreements going into it. So we'll talk about some of those, and there's some of that are in the guide, I think, itself, or in the state work plan, that talk about demand-driven orientation and partnerships with business and career pathways and some of those kinds of things to keep in the back of your mind while you're doing it. We'll also spend some time talking about design thinking, not just tweaking what you've got, but looking at and through your action plans if there's some things that maybe you need to rethink how you're doing business. whether that's through looking at your work, the processes and the customer flow through the center, or whatever you might want to look at. We'll also spend some time talking about implementing your plan too. What can go wrong? What kinds of things to look out for? Something will go wrong, right? Never fails. Something goes wrong. You have good ideas and good intentions, and it doesn't work. So what do you do then, and what caused it, and how can you kind of avoid those to a certain extent? And then we want to hear from you in terms of specific kinds of things. You've kind of decided where you're at, where you want to go. What help do you need to get there? What kind of questions can we answer for you, or find out if we don't know? We really don't know everything, that's for sure. And so if we don't know, we can research and find out, or we can go to other states and see what they've done if you've got something that we haven't seen yet. So that's what the day is going to be like. It's going to be pretty relaxed. That's kind of Doug in my style, kind of laid back. We'll have an agenda. We'll have some slides to look at, but we'll go with what the need of the room is when it comes to it at the end of the day. So that's what we're looking at, Diane.
So we do have a few questions, if I could.
Please.
We have a question from Mike. Is the next meeting on the 10th mandatory or only suggested?
These meetings are all suggested and recommended. The idea is that by coming together as a team in particular, it affords two opportunities. One is to continue to deepen your shared perspective on service integration. And the other is to learn from each other. And that's one of the many strengths that Doug and Lou bring to this process, is a group sharing and just understanding how the other local workforce areas are doing it. We know that some of you have always been a little ahead of the curve and have just been figuring out your own way to move this forward, and others are struggling a bit. And integration, collaboration, coordination does not come easily in many parts of the world. So any opportunity to help strengthen those is a good thing. It also, I guess we recognize that the timeline has been tight, that we've been developing these resources as we've gone along. So it's a kind of a process that's still being invented, and we didn't feel comfortable requiring this attendance. Again, it's strongly encouraged that you go, but not required.
I have another question. This one's from Carrie. The next steps, action planning tool. Is that just for the 3 to 5 priority goals?
I'm glad you asked. That was a question that we've received a couple of times, and the answer is yes. We didn't think it would be practical to expect movement along all 15 goals. And again, this goes back to Appendix H, which is designed to help you figure out which of those 15 goals is most important for you to make some progress in. So the action planning step is to take each one of those 3 to 5, roughly, goals that you all agree are the top priority, and then expand on each one in terms of how you're going to go about addressing it. And that's why it has those columns that take you from the goal, and we're talking about writing a SMART goal, which is something that Lou and Doug will talk about next week, and then identifying for each goal what tactics you're going to use, who's going to be charged and accountable for achieving those over what period of time, and then what kind of deliverable or product will result. And if you take those pages and put them together, you'll have a pretty robust action plan for the next year that gives you a way to tackle a limited number of your service integration priorities. Do we have any other comments or suggestions?
Hey, Diana, it's Lisa. I'm sorry.
Yes. Please.
I thought somebody was going to jump in for me.
We don't have any current questions, but if we could possibly go over some of the questions on the FAQ list that might help and spur some more comments.
Sure.
Do you have, Diana? I could go over, Scott, if you want to.
Yeah, if you could, please. My internet connection is bad.
Sure.
Lisa, could you lead that?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Since I have some background noise. So I'm not going to go over the first and second questions because I think we've done that earlier. We did have a question on the FAQ that was about all partners may not attend these webinars. How is this information for service integration delivered to a partner? And the question, we're saying that it is delivered in 4 ways. First, each of the core state agency partners currently emails their program partners with current information. Second, the one-stop operator and or lead self-assessment partners with lead facilitators expected to share important information with partners. Third, the new IWN web pages on service integration contain the latest information available. And fourth, all the webinars are archived. Our next question was around service integration policy, and it doesn't specify how one-stop is defined for purpose of the self-assessment process. So what should be included for purposes of self-assessment? Okay. The service integration self-assessment is for the entire system. And one-stop system includes all centers and access points. Our next question was about geographic. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hello, Lisa.
Yeah.
We're getting some comments that the audience isn't able to understand you.
Oh, okay. Is that because I'm getting an echo? So Scott, you might want to take these over.
Okay, I will do that.
Thanks. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Which level were you at, or which question?
I was on question 5.
Okay. In question 5, how should geographically large and or dense LWIAs approach self-assessment? Each LWIB will have to determine how best to achieve a system focus. Many local workforce systems have centers and sites that vary widely in their level of integration. The purpose of the self-assessment process is to accurately reflect those variations and identify strategies to strengthen integration across its functions and teams. I was wondering if one of our panelists might want to interject at that.
And this is speaking on behalf of the state agencies that were involved in developing this process, intentionally left a lot of room for the local workforce areas and boards to design the process that made the most sense for them. It was kind of an inevitability given the different characteristics of LWIAs across the state. We couldn't come up with a specific formula for everyone, and intentionally are leaving a lot of discretion to the local areas. And that's where I think bringing us all together periodically to talk about those differences is a really good opportunity to learn from others and kind of decide which path makes the most sense for your particular local workforce area. Did any of the other folks on the line care to comment on that one? That was that's tricky. There's no doubt about it. But one of the benefits of bringing your partners together is that you are collaborating on what that right path is.
Diana, this is Lou. If I remember right, one of the LWIAs decided that they would have a northern action plan and a southern action plan because the two parts of the two regions of the LWIA were quite different and had different community resources and different job sectors and different dynamics. And so even though it's one LWIA, they decided it made sense to have two action plans and in different priorities for each action plan. I think if I recall correctly, that was sanctioned by you folks at the state.
And Lou, in your experience working with other states, how have they handled geographies that have very different characteristics? Is there
well, yeah, there's a couple of different ways. One is depending upon the density and the number of partners. You know, sometimes they do have different action plans. They might have the same goals, but they might approach those goals differently, because they might see the goals as kind of for the whole workforce board, but they might have different strategies for achieving those goals is one way. Another way is some of them, if they're quite different and they're both large enough, they might have actually different priorities. I don't know that would fit in with your system, but that's how some states have done it. Otherwise, it's a matter of involving those more remote areas in the discussions, because oftentimes those are the ones that kind of get left behind. You know, they have different needs. I know when we were actually working earlier in Illinois, and one of the LWEs decided that they really needed to do more workshops in their off-site areas, and they're not in their comprehensive center, but in some of the other centers. They were really working on making those more accessible for them. So that was part of their action plan, was the closing of the gap between services. So you know, I think your approach of having it be determined locally how to do that and give them some flexibility is a good one. And you know, people can use their own creativity in it, but certainly to involve those areas that maybe don't get the focus as much as what they could.
That's very
Doug may have
helpful.
seen other things. Yeah, and Doug's done some other work in some other some neighboring states too. I don't know. Doug usually has some good suggestions, so I want to make sure I give him his chance. If he's still on, I know he had another call. Yeah, I know he had another call. He had to go to. Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to have that be as it is then.
So
also,
next FAQ.
If I may mention, Scott, registration for next the 10th is still open. And again, we're pushing it because it's an opportunity to exchange information and do some group brainstorming and problem solving. I think there's always a lot that we can learn from each other. So if you're interested in attending that session, just let us know, and we'll send you the registration information if you haven't already seen it. So back to you, Scott.
Next question is, are we able, and these are off of the FAQs, are there any approaches that we should avoid? The service integration continuum model recognizes the various one-stop centers and sites that may be different stages and variations may also exist across programs and within centers. As a result, producing a single set of averaged self-assessment ratings for an LWEA in which levels of service integration vary significantly would be misleading and not helpful for action planning purposes. For example, which is to conduct many separate self-assessments and bundle them together as the system could perpetuate program silos and undermine the entire purpose of the assessment process.
That's really an elaboration on the previous question, and what it is in essence saying is that you need to find that balance between kind of the specifics for a given area, but also not making it so fragmented that the silos continue to exist.
Okay. You keep saying that all partners should participate. So does that mean participation is optional?
No. I thought there was a response to that one, but the short answer is no. The whole point, right, is to approach all of the core and required partners in your local workforce area and invite them to participate in a meaningful way. And of course, recognizing that in some areas this will not be possible, just make sure that information is provided in the final report that who was invited and who accepted, and then who was not engaged in the process.
Okay. Are the partner ratings to be submitted? And I could read that, but I was wondering if we could just get your reflection on that for Appendix G.
Sure, and we do want to see the individual partner ratings. You'll already be collecting them because that's the input for Appendix H. So we don't ask you to, retype them or make them look neat and pretty. We just want to see that raw data. At the state level, it will help us understand basically how divergent the various understandings and perceptions are. Lou already mentioned, I think Lou or Doug, that every partner brings with them to the table a different set of understandings and perceptions about service integration. And we want to know from a baseline standpoint where we are as a state so that we can track progress over subsequent years. This will be an annual process. So yes, we would like to see those sheets, and we'll be tallying the data up, roll it up into some state level statistics, and there will be no disclosure of any individual LWIA's information.
We've covered this and we've made reference to it, but the facilitator's guide has been made available on the Illinois WorkNet website. The question is, what is the facilitator's guide and how is it different from the self-assessment and overview guide? The facilitator's guide provides detailed guidance to the individuals leading the self-assessment process. It contains much of the same information presented in the comprehensive self-assessment and overview guide, but organizes the material in a step-by-step manner so it is easy to follow. The facilitator's guide should be used with a self-assessment and overview guide and the facilitator's training PowerPoint developed by the Workforce Innovation Technical Assistance Center, WINTAC.
Yes, and I'll put a shameless plug in for the facilitator's guide that Bevan Gibson developed. She took it from the perspective of the facilitator and what that individual would need to know to help lead the self-assessment process from beginning to end. So it really is kind of a roadmap on how you work through that entire process. The larger service integration self-assessment overview is really for anyone who wants to get a better understanding about what service integration is, why it's important, and what the overall process looks like. So the facilitator's guide is just a much more granular approach that was intended specifically for the facilitator.
When will fillable versions of the forms be available for the local areas?
Yes, and those are all on the website now under the Forms and Guidance page.
Excellent. There have been a number of changes to the forms. If we use the old forms, how do we need to complete the updated version? And we've referred to that.
Yeah, I think we talked about that.
For the timeline, are you looking for a year or a specific anticipated date?
We, at this point, are looking for this plan, the action plan that you'll be developing, to run from approximately October 1st of this year through September 30th of next. The intent is to have this be an annual process so that you can track how well you're progressing along each one of your priority goals, and then set new goals for the coming year. And this will not require, as far as I understand, and perhaps Mark can help with this, but will not require any changes in your local WIOA plan. It's really kind of a separate but parallel implementation process. So Mark, is that an accurate statement?
Can you repeat that again? I think that it is going to be something that has to be incorporated in the local and regional plans because it is direction by the local board as to how the system needs to operate. So I'm not sure if I totally agree with you, but maybe I didn't understand fully what your response was.
Right. No, this is more on the annual basis. And absolutely, the whole point of this self-assessment process is to feed into the local and regional WIOA plans.
I think they're going to have to look at their plans, and if they're so specific in those plans when they, let's say, put out the new one in March or April of 2020, whenever it is due, if it is so specific that after a year a new self-assessment is conducted, they need to review that and change it because the plan for addressing service integration has changed, and they would have to do a modification to that plan. So I'm not an expert on how regional local plans are developed and written, how specific they need to be in their focus, but just be mindful as those are being written that the potential is there with the need for addressing service integration annually, that they should be careful of the wording, include as much specificity as they feel they need, understanding how that might be affected and require modifications in future years. So, for example, someone, a local area might address 2 of the 15, strongly address 2 or 3 of the 15 and get those off the books, those 15 functions. Does that change the local and regional plan next year? I don't know. I think they would just have to look at that.
That's very helpful. Thank you. We'll revisit that question in the FAQ and add that information. Thank you very much, Mark. Just one quick addition to that. I know that some of you have wondered about the extent to which the service integration self-assessment process is being synced with all the other planning processes that are unfolding, Perkins, workforce education, the WIOA planning process. And I guess the important thing to share is that at the state level, there is quite a bit of conversation occurring on how these processes can be aligned to the maximum extent possible. So we'll see where that goes, but I think that
Diane, it's Mark again.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt and go back, but before we lose the thought on the plans, a recommendation was just made to me that indicated maybe the best approach to use for recognizing the efforts around service integration is to reference your action plans rather than include them specifically within those plans, so that as the action plan for service integration changes, you don't have to go back and modify your regional and local plans. It's just a step that helps you not have to do that extra work after a year, but certainly make sure that those action plans are updated on an annual basis to reflect current status of the approach that's being made by the local board in the local areas. This will be in the planning guidance. And my understanding is that this will be in your planning guidance when it's released. So within the next several weeks or months, when that guidance comes out, service integration should be addressed and how you recognize it within your plans.
That's excellent and very clear. So thank you. We'll change the FAQ to reflect that as well. Okay, Scott, back to you.
Okay. Please clarify the self-assessment results are presented to the local Workforce Innovation Board or to the Illinois Workforce Innovation Board.
Okay, I think we addressed that as well.
Yes.
And your action steps need to be presented to your local board, and then the entire self-assessment package will be submitted to Mark Burgess as the representative of the Illinois Workforce Innovation Board. And that's due by 5:00 p.m. on September 30th.
Next one, are we able to adjust some of the activities or slides in the presentation?
Yes, absolutely. As we've indicated, these materials were developed to be of assistance to you. Much of it was adapted directly from WinTAC. So we ask that wherever that occurs, that you make sure that you give credit to them. They've been very generous in sharing their materials with us. Other than that, we would love to see whatever you do change in case it's something that we'd want to adopt for the entire state.
So next question, is it possible to send out pre-work or surveys to gather data in order to set the stage for the meeting? And it could save time.
Yes, here again, we've encouraged that these meetings take place face-to-face, and that's something that WinTech has strongly urged us to relay to the field. And that's primarily because it's another opportunity to deepen your understanding of each other's perspectives and kind of understandings about service integration. If, however, that isn't practical, and we know that you're very busy, there's a lot of competing priorities. If you do need to start by having kind of an emailed process, then we would certainly understand. The key then is to take the results of that process and use those to have a very robust conversation around your service integration priority.
The next question deals with the September 10th meeting, and it asks if partners, should we come even if partners are not coming? We will have our self-assessment meeting prior to the 10th. Is it still, would it still be beneficial?
Yes. The information that will be exchanged and the potential kind of aha moments that might be valuable for you to take back to your partners would certainly be worth having at least one representative attend. If there's any way you could get additional partners, it just is a much stronger message if more than one of you is able to bring it back. And again, it's another step in building that shared understanding around service integration. But we would always encourage at least some representation over none.
I think you just answered, or we just answered this, but what is the relationship between the service integration action plans and the local regional WIOA planning process? Yeah, I do think we answered that. Do any of our other panelists have anything to add on that?
No, I think that was addressed.
Okay, thanks, Laura.
And the final FAQ, doesn't service integration only relate to the local center or system? No, and we have some important examples in the responses of the role that the state plays in basically developing and maintaining and improving the overall service integration system and supporting efforts like this one. So both have to operate. The local systems have to focus at their level on specific improvement opportunities, while the state is orchestrating what happens obviously statewide, and then provides the infrastructure that enables the locals to do what they need to do. And I think that was the last question you said, Scott? That concludes the FAQs.
Great.
And we do not have any questions in our question box.
All right. Well, just I'll give it a moment for any of our other panelists to add any final thoughts or charges.
This is Lisa. No, I don't, but I did want to just thank everyone for participating and just reinforce that, reach out to one of our contacts if you have any additional questions. But Mark or Laura, if you want to jump in with any final comments.
I just wanted to point out on the latest version of the self-assessment guide on page 11, the appendix was mislabeled under final self-assessment submission. Number 1, the completed service integration self-assessment identifying information form should be Appendix K. It is currently listed as Appendix J, and it should be Appendix K. So I wanted to point that out. And that lists exactly what needs to be submitted by 5 p.m. on September 30th to Mark Burgess. It lists out the different attachments from Appendix G, Appendix H, Appendix I is optional now, Appendix J, and Appendix K, as well as a copy of any report or any information that is presented to the local board, and any other recommendations to the IWIB for approving this process. That's what should be submitted to Mark by that time.
And Laura, I think we added some of the content that needed to be addressed in that final report, the narrative. was there something at the bottom of K that talks about, what went well in the process? What challenges or barriers did you meet? Could you just briefly go through those?
Yes, that was added to the bottom of Appendix K. Again, all of these updated forms are out underneath the guidance and forms tile. And some of the information that was listed here is we want to know what went well in the process. We want to find out for best practices so we can share those across the state. We want to find out if there were any problems that you encountered and how you dealt with them. We want to see any examples of service integration ideas and suggestions that were raised during these discussions with your partners so they can be elevated to the state agency level. We want to know how to strengthen the overall self-assessment process for the next cycle. So any information that we gather here, and when the report will be presented to the IWIB. So any information that you want to submit that we can learn from and develop a better process or create some additional guidance or forms or any add to our practices section on the service integration site would be fantastic.
Great, thank you so much. Just to reiterate that we're asking for this report, and it doesn't have to be long, maybe 3 to 5 pages max, and you can do bullet points, whatever's easiest for you. The IWIB is very interested in understanding this implementation process, what's gone well and what needs to be improved, and that's what we'll be addressing. After you turn in your reports, we'll comb through them very carefully and try to see what the main trends, issues, opportunities are for coming years. But we've had a great deal of involvement from our core WIOA partners, DCEO obviously, ICCB, DHS. I always miss one.
IDES.
I thought I said that.
Oh.
But
and I wanted to point out that it is a group effort because everyone helped develop these forms. Bevan Gibson, that helped develop the Facilitators Guide, is from ICCB Title II. That WinTech was brought to us through Title IV, Voc Rehabilitation. So this has been a group effort across the core partners at the state level.
Thank you. That's what I was struggling to say. So thank you very much, Laura. All right. I think we've covered everything that we had hoped to. We appreciate very much your questions. If you have any further ones that occur to you after this webinar, please reach out to any one of us on that landing page for service integration, and we hope to see many of you next week on the 10th. So Scott, did you have some survey questions that you wanted folks to respond to?
Individuals will receive a survey asking about today's webinar. Please share with us your experience and any suggestions you might have to help us improve these webinars. So you will receive one with the email within the next 24 hours. Thank you. With that, we are concluded. And thank you for attending.